introduce you?
Yep, I'm ready.
Excellent. So back in the day, you might recall when we used to be able to meet in person, and I had the privilege of attending the 2019 Toastmasters International Convention. And that's where I saw Aaron Beverly compete first in the semifinals, and then he was moved on to the finals. And as soon as he started giving his speech, we knew right away he was a winner. And he definitely had some tough competition as well. I also recall after he won, they whisked him out into this big room where all of the Toastmasters rushed so that we could meet him and congratulate him. District Director Karen Doyle, Manusha Ranasinghe, and I stood in line for an hour and a half to get to meet Aaron. And he was so gracious, even after meeting everyone and taking pictures galore. He still had a smile on his face. And I know he was super happy to be there with all of us. So you may be surprised that Aaron considers himself an introvert. Much like many of us, I am quite sure. And public speaking and storytelling, he felt like were extroverted activities. And with hard work and dedication and a team of invaluable supporters, Aaron has actually become prolific in both skills and learned to balance his innate introversion with flashes of extroversion. Hopefully you were able to see his speech that he gave. It was an unbelievable story in which he provided a humorous take on a heavy subject of race and the importance of acceptance despite difference. And that is the speech that won him, of course, the World Championship of Public Speaking. Aaron is living proof that the art of communication can have a profoundly positive effect on the advancement of your professional career and the fulfillment of your life. So here with Keep Speaking, Keep Improving, Keep Moving, please give a big round of applause to 2019 World Champion, Aaron Beverly.
Thank you, Roxanne, and thank you to everyone in District 44 for the gracious welcome. 2019 World Champion of Public Speaking, Aaron Beverly. Even after a year has passed, I am still amazed by that title. I sit back and think to myself, man, I'm cool. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mean that out of conceit. I just find it amazing to think about the speaker that I used to be, the person that I used to be, compared to the speaker in person that I am today. Although I do have to admit that being the world champion of public speaking has some interesting after effects. For instance, I go to any Toastmaster event and there's at least one person that will say, oh my goodness, it's Aaron Beverly. And I think to myself, well, I've always been Aaron Beverly. Where have you been? But it also gets a little weird. I remember one person came up to me and said, Aaron, oh, what you did was absolutely amazing. I dream about you. But I promise it even gets a little weirder. On social media, there was one gentleman who reached out to me. He said, Aaron, can you please send me a voice message? I typed back. I said, why? He said, I just wanted to hear your voice. He was immediately unfriended. Now, even though some people can be a little bit fanatical, I still embrace it because I am proud of what I achieved. Who wouldn't be? After all, the International Speech Contest is a 6-round contest, 7 if you count the video quarterfinal. I competed in that over 6 months with 30,000 participants worldwide. And out of those 30,000, I am considered number 1. I even get this big lucite trophy. And for those of you who may not know, lucite is a type of plastic, but it's better to say lucite trophy rather than plastic trophy. But being the world champion of public speaking is something that amazes me because I never thought that I would be anything like this. Public speaking didn't come natural to me. Even speaking to other people did not come natural to me, which is a surprise to a lot of people. It was a surprise even to my friend George. I remember me and my friend George, along with the other Toastmasters in our club, after the Toastmaster meeting, we were sitting in an Italian restaurant. We're eating, we're drinking, we're having a good time. Then we start on the topic of introverts and extroverts. And I tell my friend George, as well as everybody else, that I am probably the most introverted person that you could ever meet. Now, my friend George, he hears this, he ponders it. He puts down his drink, he looks me in the eye, and he says one word that I will never forget. Psh. Yes, that is the word. Psh. Spelled P-S-H-H. Psh. Now, what does this word mean? Well, basically, you can understand that the word means bullsh, but I try not to use that type of language in a Toastmaster event, so let us just stick with the word psh. And of course, this being a Toastmaster event, even if it's virtual, I'm sure there's a grammarian online that is thinking, Aaron, psh is not a word. Psh is a sound effect. Do you know what I say to you, my friend? Psh. But George's logic was that I could not possibly be an introvert because I was good at public speaking. This is a misconception that a lot of people have. There are a lot of people who think that in order to be a public speaker, you have to be an extrovert. You have to be gregarious. You have to love people. But what is an introvert and what is an extrovert? The best definition that I have found is that I read this book called Quiet by Susan Cain. And just if you can, type in the chat yes or no if you have heard of this book called Quiet by author Susan Cain. Okay. A couple people saying no. Okay, so a lot of no's coming in. That's fine. I definitely would recommend it for anybody who wants to have an understanding of introverts and extroverts. But Susan Cain, her definition of an introvert and an extrovert are: an introvert is someone who thrives by being alone. They regain their energy from being in isolation. They tend to lose energy with social interaction. Extroverts, on the other hand, they love social interaction. They are energized by social interaction. They tend to have more anxiousness or they get more antsy when they are alone, when they are by themselves. They tend to lose energy in those cases. Now, if I have to choose between those two, I would definitely say that I'm on the introverted side. If I had a choice between speaking in front of 2,000 people or sitting at home alone on my couch reading a book, I'm going to read my book every single time. In fact, I love the series Harry Potter. If you are a person who is familiar, I love Harry Potter. I love the lore of Harry Potter. I've read each of those books about 10,000 times. I am what they call a pothead, but not the type that you immediately thought, the good kind. But public speaking, that wasn't my forte. That was not my natural environment. So the question becomes, how did I, a person who considers himself to be an introvert, in fact, a person who didn't even like to have conversations with people, go on to become the world champion of public speaking? Looking back, I think it all falls into one mantra that I live my life by now. Keep speaking, keep improving, keep moving. Let me take you back to when I first started speaking. I first started public speaking about the age of 6 years old. I grew up in a Christian household, and one day while driving to church, my mother has this brilliant idea. I'm pretty sure the conversation with God went, God, for the first time in my 6-year-old son's life, I'm going to make him speak in front of the entire church congregation by reading a passage from the Bible. Now, me, when I hear this from my mother, I look at her and I say, psh. And no, Ladies and gentlemen, I am just joking. I did not actually say that to my mother, my friends. That would have been very stupid. No, I didn't do that. Instead, I looked at my mom, I crossed my arms, and I said, no. But my friends, that was stupid too. Growing up in my household, there were many words that children were not allowed to say to a parent. One of those words was no. My mom was furious. I'm talking Incredible Hulk with a wig, furious. In that moment, I was faced with humanity's two greatest fears. Facing that church congregation and speaking in front of them, that was the fear of public speaking. Facing an angry mother, that was the fear of death. Since I am still here today, you know which option I chose. But I remember standing in front of that church congregation. My body was shaking uncontrollably. My heart was pounding. When it was over, I thought to myself, I am glad that's done. I am never doing that again. I hate public speaking. Fast forward, I'm about to graduate from middle school. Middle school graduation means that the valedictorian, or the top person in the class, has to give a speech. I thought, hey, that's a great idea because I'm not the valedictorian. In fact, I was not the second best in my class. I was not the third best in my class. I was fourth. I have never at no other time been happier not being in first place. That is until my teacher, Mr. Zane, he has this brilliant idea. He says, for the first time in the history of middle school graduations, we are going to have speeches from the top 4 students. I'm sitting in the back of the classroom. I'm hearing him say these words, and I'm thinking to myself, psh. Graduation comes. I get up on that stage once again. My body is shaking uncontrollably. My heart is pounding. When it's over, I think to myself, I am glad that's done. I am never doing that again. I hate public speaking. Fast forward 4 years later, I am now a senior in high school. I wasn't the top 4 in my class. I wasn't the top 10 in my class. I wasn't the top 50 in my class. I was not a very good high school student, but the benefit for me, I knew that I was going to be safe from giving any speeches that year. That is until my principal, Mrs. Pelzer, she has this brilliant idea. She says, for the first time in the history of this high school, we are going to teach all seniors public speaking. All of the teachers think this is a wonderful idea. They say, oh, yes, that's great. Guess what I'm thinking? Psh. Senior year comes and goes. I graduate. And when I graduate, I think to myself, I am glad that's over. I am never doing that again. I hate public speaking. Freshman year in college, guess what class I have to take? Public speaking. For me, public speaking was like that person who likes you, but you don't like them back. However, they can't take the hint. I thought to myself, why was I always put in these situations? Why couldn't public speaking see that I just didn't like it that way? Why couldn't public speaking see that I was an introvert, that I was a quiet person, that I did not want to be in the limelight? I wanted to stay back. Why couldn't it see that? But then the other question becomes, after all of the experience that I had with public speaking, why was it still such a challenge for me? The answer was simple, but it was something that gets overlooked by a lot of people. I hated public speaking and I wanted to avoid public speaking for the same reason a lot of people hate public speaking, for the same reason a lot of people want to avoid public speaking, because they fear it. Now the question becomes, why do you fear public speaking? This is something that I had to realize because I was speaking, but I wasn't improving. In order to improve, you have to recognize what limitations are holding you back from growth. I want us to do a little exercise right now. For about 30 seconds, I want us to think about the first things that come to your mind, why you think people fear public speaking, or why you may have feared public speaking, why you think people have anxiety of public speaking. 30 seconds, I want us to think about this and type them into the chat. So any reason why you think people are afraid or why you are afraid of public speaking. So being judged and rejected, and right after that, another being judged, saying something incorrectly, and again, being judged, embarrassment, judgment, look bad, being embarrassed. Yep, I'll get to that one in a bit. Fear of embarrassing yourself, lack of confidence, afraid of what people might think. Oh, so it looks like some childhood trauma from before, being teased. Don't feel their voice has value. Ooh, that's a good one. Being laughed at. Okay. These are all great reasons. These are all valid reasons. These are all correct reasons. The key to this exercise is to show you how easy and simple it is to get over the first challenge. And the first challenge is specifying what it is that is holding you back. I personally believe that there is no such thing as a fear of public speaking. What you fear is an aspect of public speaking or a consequence of public speaking. The key is that you have to specify what that fear is, what that anxiety is. Even going outside of public speaking, if you have a fear or an anxiety about something, you should sit down and reflect exactly what it is that is making you afraid, that is making you anxious. Why do you feel this way? And be as specific as possible. For instance, you may be a person who has no problem speaking in front of a group of 5 people, but as soon as that balloons up to 10 or more, that's when you start to get a little bit anxious. Or you're perfectly fine with the material that you have to say, but the fact that you are on a physical stage terrifies you. This is how specific you need to be. When you say something like, I'm afraid of public speaking, you make public speaking this huge mountain that you cannot possibly surpass or climb over. By specifying the fear, you can make this tall mountain into a small hurdle. And a hurdle can be jumped over, a hurdle can be walked around. But again, the key is specification. If you do not specify your fear, you are guaranteed to intensify your fear. If you do not specify your fear, you are guaranteed to intensify your fear. So this simple exercise that we did, I ask you to take it to your mentees. I ask you to take it to your clubs and share this information and help them, guide them through this process of specifying why they are being held back, why they are anxious of public speaking. Personally, I wish that I had had the foresight to sit down and reflect exactly why I was afraid of public speaking. But instead of doing that proactively, my fear hit me right in the face. It was my senior year in college, my sophomore year in college. I joined a student leadership training program. At the end of this program, there was a graduation of sorts, and all of the students had a role to fill in that graduation. My role was to give a gift to the keynote speaker and thank him for his time. I only had to say 3 lines. On behalf of the Student Leadership Training Institute, we would like to thank you for your time today. Please accept this token of appreciation. I will shake his hand him the gift, sit down, end the story. The day comes, the keynote speaker finishes speaking. I get up, I shake his hand, I say, on behalf of, I completely went blank. And whenever you mess up, whenever you forget a line, that's when you start to notice how time just slows down to a crawl. 5 seconds seems like an eternity. And I stood in front of everybody, silent, for 15 seconds. It was 15 seconds of the most awkward silence that you could have ever experienced. Meanwhile, this whole 15 seconds have passed by. I am still holding this man's hand. He is looking at me as if to say, kid, please say something. It is not that hard. I said something. Here. And I sat down. In that moment, though, I realized what my fear of public speaking truly was. My fear was that I would get in front of everybody and forget what I wanted to say. That I would get in front of everybody and embarrass myself. Now that I had specified what the fear was, even if it was by force, I was now equipped to start the growth process. But it can only truly start if you take specific action on that specific fear. My specific action was joining Toastmasters in the year 2009. When I joined Toastmasters, I had to give my first speech. Most of you are probably familiar with the icebreaker speech. The icebreaker speech, the first speech in the Toastmasters curriculum, a 4-minute speech. But at this point, I knew what I wanted to avoid. I wanted to avoid a situation where I forgot what I wanted to say and that I would not, and make sure that I would not embarrass myself again. In order to do that, I decided to do this novel thing. Maybe you have heard of it. It is called practice. And I practiced, I am not exaggerating when I tell you this, for 20 hours straight. 20 hours straight for a 4-minute speech. But it was good. I didn't have any filler words. I had tons of vocal variety. I had nice speech structure. At the end of the speech that day, the Toastmaster of the day, he got up, he looked at the crowd, he pointed to me, and he said, in 2009, there is a future world champion of public speaking. In that short span of time, I went from embarrassing myself on a stage, being fearful of public speaking, to being proclaimed a future world champion of public speaking. I was finally able to grow because I had identified the fear and took specific action. Now, when I heard about the world champion of public speaking in 2009, it actually took me a while to start participating in the international speech contest. I first participated in the international speech contest in 2012. At this time, though, I had thought that the words from that gentleman in 2009, I allowed those words to go to my head a little bit. And I thought that this was going to be the year that I won the World Championship of Public Speaking in my first year. I was the best speaker in my club. I was the best speaker in my area. I just knew it. I knew that I was going to win all 6 rounds and go to the World Championship of Public Speaking. I participated in the first round, the club level. I dominated the club level, likely because I was the only participant, but still, that's neither here nor there. I just knew that I was going to keep going all 6 rounds, dominate, and win the World Championship of Public Speaking. So you can imagine my surprise, my shock, when I get to the area contest, round 2, and I place second. After that contest, there was a gentleman who walked up to me without even introducing himself to me. He looks at me and he says, "Do you want to know why you lost?" Now, keep in mind, this was a perfect opportunity for this gentleman to learn some critical evaluation skills. If you are a competitor in a contest, the last thing you ever want to hear from a perfect stranger is, "Do you want to know why you lost?" But luckily for this gentleman and for myself, honestly, I was able to maintain my composure, and I asked him, "Sure, can you please tell me?" What he told me, though, was that, "What you did, Aaron, you basically just preached to the audience. Your speech had no substance. It was all sizzle, no steak. You're a great speaker. You have good talent, but you need help with your storytelling. You need help with your speech structure." Now, something else that can keep you from growing is your own ego. I said before that I had allowed those words of that Toastmaster of the Day in 2009 to go to my head. I thought that I was going to be a world champion of public speaking. I thought it was destiny. But what I didn't realize was that there was much more that I needed to learn in the realm of public speaking. You could say that I came in with a lot of talent, but I needed to learn the fundamentals. I needed to learn the substance. I needed to learn what made a good speech a good speech. To do this, I had to swallow my pride, drop my ego, and ask somebody for help. I needed to find a mentor, somebody who I felt was better than me, and somebody who could teach me what I needed to know about public speaking. And a lot of people find themselves in similar predicaments where they may be skilled, they may be talented, but they need some help advancing. They need some help to keep improving and therefore keep moving forward. For me, finding a mentor, I had to find a mentor that checked off 5 criteria. And these 5 criteria I'm going to share with you so that hopefully you can take these 5 criteria and find your own mentors, or just help somebody find their own mentors. The first thing that you need to seek when you are looking for a quality mentor, that mentor should have been where you want to go. They have been where you want to go. I decided to seek out the help of somebody who had been where I wanted to go. Luckily for me, there was a person on my college campus when I joined Toastmasters. There was a person who had started that Student Leadership Training Institute who was a Toastmaster. Not only a Toastmaster, not just any Toastmaster, he was one of the bigger names in the world of Toastmasters. His name was Dilip Abesekera. Or I should say his name still is Dilip Abesekera. But Dilip Abesekera was the 2005-2006 president of Toastmasters International. And he just so happened to be a professor at my school. This is a lesson in itself, because a lot of people think that in order to find a mentor, they have to find somebody in some far off land. They have to find somebody at the pinnacle of their profession. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the person who can help you is right in front of you. You just need to look a little harder. And Dilip Abesekera, he wasn't a world champion of public speaking. He hadn't reached the pinnacle of the Toastmasters communication world, but he did come pretty darn close. In 1992, he was the second place winner in the international speech contest. Even though he wasn't a world champion, he still had many world champion qualities. And more so, he knew how to at least get out of the second round. He was a person who had been where I wanted to go. He checked the box, and I decided I was going to keep pursuing to make him my mentor. But there are other criteria that make a quality mentor, and more reasons why I thought Dilip would be a good mentor for me. The second criteria to a quality mentor is that they fit your speaking style. They need to fit your speaking style. And I would even go so far as to say they need to fit your style personality-wise. When you are trying to learn speaking, you don't want to be mentored or coached by a person who has a completely different view than you on public speaking. For me, I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to tell a story, make a point, sit down. I liked Dilip's way of speaking because he was a storyteller. He told a story, he made a point, and then he sat down. There are other speakers who have other different styles. For instance, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the speaker Tony Robbins. For those of you who may not be familiar with Tony Robbins is one of the most energetic speakers that you could ever meet. 5 seconds into his presentation, he's just going, rah, 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 get up, get up, get up, get up, clap your hands, clap your hands. 5 seconds in, I would be completely exhausted. I'm not going to go to him to be my mentor because he has a totally different speaking style than I do. Finding a speaking style is very important because you don't want somebody that you're going to clash with, or you don't want somebody who's going to make you feel uncomfortable when you are speaking. It's good to go a little bit outside your comfort zone, but if you're going so far out that you can't even recognize where you were, that's not very good. So Make sure that your mentor fits or complements your speaking style. Number 3, this one is critical. They preach and practice the fundamentals. They preach and practice the fundamentals. I knew just from watching Dilip that he had a great comfort around speech structure. I knew that he had great comfort around storytelling. I knew that he had great comfort around other fundamentals like eye contact, vocal variety, pacing, enunciation. All of these fundamentals were things that I knew I could improve upon, and he could help me do that. If you have a mentor or a coach who does not practice the fundamentals, or they try to ignore the fundamentals and just try to gloss over them, that is not the mentor for you. If you don't know the fundamentals, you are probably going to set yourself back. It is going to take you a long time to unlearn bad habits and learn the fundamental good habits. The Toastmasters curriculum is a great source of what it takes to build those fundamental skills, but it's always valuable to have a coach or a mentor that will teach you those same principles, those same fundamentals. So they need to preach and practice the fundamentals. Number 4, another critical one. They will be a person who will give you unbiased feedback. I decided to participate again in the International Speech Contest in 2013 with Dilip as my mentor. I remember I wrote a speech and I thought, oh man, this is such a great speech. I finally think I'm making this into a story. This is going to be so good. This is going to win the 2013 World Championship of Public Speaking. I gave my draft to Dilip. Dilip's immediate response, it has potential. Then he broke it down even further for me. He said, Aaron, this can win a club. This can maybe squeak by an area contest. This will not win a division contest. With that unbiased feedback, I was challenged. I knew that I had to take that speech and work on it a little bit more, try to refine it so that I could make it something that would get past that division. That would not have happened if I had a person who said, oh, Aaron, this is the best speech ever. Take this. I know that this is going to win, knowing full well that it wasn't. You don't want somebody who's going to sugarcoat everything just to spare your feelings. Sometimes you need a person who is going to challenge you a little bit harder. Somebody who's going to tell you the blunt, honest truth. It may be discouraging at first. It may hurt a little bit, but when you sit down and you think about it, you'll realize that it's something that is used to help you grow and become better. This leads me to criteria number 5. Your mentor will never, ever, 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 ever tell you that their way is the only way. If you ever encounter a mentor or a coach who tells you that their way is the only way, you must do everything that I say or else you will not succeed. If you ever encounter a mentor or a coach like that, I want you to introduce them to a new word. Psh! And then I want you to run away from them as fast as you possibly can. I always say that there is no such thing as the way. There is only a way. It is up to you to find your way. And a quality mentor or coach will encourage you to find your own way. Even though they can encourage you, it's not something that they can truly teach you. At this point, it is something that you have to gain through experience. This is what I had to do. Again, I competed in the International Speech Contest in 2013. With Dilip's direct help, from 2012 to 2013, I went from not being able to get out of the area contest at round 2 to getting all the way to the semifinals the very next year. That is the benefit of a quality mentor. But when I was on stage in 2013, I realized that I was speaking like Dillip. I had the same pacing as Dillip. And for some reason, it didn't quite click. I wasn't able to even place in the semifinals that year. I had to try again in 2014. But I was encouraged by Dillip to find my own way. And I knew that I had to find my own way. So I started to test things out a little bit. Remember when I said it's okay to go a little bit outside of your comfort zone? That's what I decided to do in 2014, to stretch myself just a little bit so that I could keep improving and keep moving forward as a speaker. I decided that I was going to be a little bit more energetic on stage. I was going to incorporate a little bit of that Tony Robbins that I talked about before, a little bit of that energy, along with the storytelling that I had before. In hindsight, where I should have just taken it up to this level, I decided to take it all the way up to this level. The benefit was I did win my district for a second straight year. But I remember that year, Dr. Randy Harvey was the guest speaker. Randy Harvey was the 2004 world champion of public speaking. When I asked him for his feedback, he told me, Aaron, you have a problem. You're a good speaker. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, being a good speaker, that is a problem? He basically told me, Aaron, you have the ability to take something that should not go very far, very far. That is one of the most backhanded compliments you could ever get, isn't it? But what he was saying was that I had a lot of skill. I had a speech that had a lot of vocal variety. It was very fun. It was very energetic. It had voices. It had analogies and allegories. It was about a speech about a boy with a dream. And I used the analogy of the three little pigs in their houses. So if you have the three little pigs and you have houses, that also means you have a big bad wolf. And he had a big bad voice like this. And he would huff, he would puff, and he would blow the house down. I thought it was great. But Randy said, we hear the voices, but we're not connecting. When I heard this feedback from Randy Harvey and him telling me that basically I needed to take my speech and revise it or go with a new speech altogether, I thought to myself, I just won my district for a second year in a row, Randy Harvey. This speech is good. This speech can win the World Championship of Public Speaking. So I went to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2014 for the semifinals. I gave that speech, and I am not exaggerating when I tell you, I have never, ever looked at that performance since, because I knew Randy Harvey was right. As I was on that stage, I could feel that I wasn't connected with the audience. The audience wasn't engaged with my story. They were hearing the story, but they weren't feeling the story or anything that I was saying. I personally hope that all versions of that speech have gotten burned and destroyed so that there's no evidence that I ever gave that speech ever again. But in 2014, I was able to hear the world champion of public speaking for 2014, Danajaya Hidetarachi. He gave a speech called I See Something that has gone on to become one of the most popular, if not the most popular world championship speech ever. But when he was on stage, I noticed it was just simple. There were no voices, no gimmicks. There was just him, his story, and the audience. It was just a personal message, a personal story that he was sharing with the audience. And I thought to myself, I have to make my speeches more personal. So in 2015, I competed again. I decided to write a new speech. This speech was from a previous speech that I had given in my club, which is another point in itself. Don't throw away your speeches just because you've given them one time. You can refine your previous speeches and make them better. I decided to refine a story about a bad dating experience. I honestly did not think it would do very well. I thought, oh, this is too simple. This is too basic. Everybody has had a bad dating experience. This is not unique. I ended up getting back to the district level contest, which was a surprise to me because it made me realize that people do want to relate to you. They want to hear things about experiences that they may have experienced themselves. They can relate to stuff like that. But I wasn't able to get out of the district. I wasn't able to win my district for a third year in a row. I was originally going to just throw that speech out, but a gentleman walked up to me afterwards and he said, Aaron, I have heard you in 2012, 13, and 14. That was the best speech that I have ever heard you give. That was when I knew that I was onto something. So again, instead of throwing that speech out, I decided to refine it even more. I have the benefit of being in close proximity to 2 districts. My original district is District 38. I am also working in District 18. I joined a club in District 18, and that was the club that I participated for on behalf of in 2016. I refined that speech. I made it better. I made it stronger. And the speech that I originally thought that people wouldn't like, that people wouldn't connect to, that I thought people wouldn't find unique, that speech ended up getting me to the World Championship of Public Speaking for the first time. In 2016, the World Championship of Public Speaking, I became, I guess, air quote, famous for a speech simply known as the 57-word title speech. Now, I had finally been able to improve and move up to the World Championship of Public Speaking. I thought that I had everything that I needed. I had the fundamentals now. I had a style that I was now comfortable with. I was comfortable in my own skin as a speaker. I was comfortable telling my personal stories. I got on stage, I gave a speech, and when I left that stage, I had regret. Now, my regret didn't come from placing second in the World Championship of Public Speaking. It's the trophy that you can see in the background there. I like to display it because I am proud of the second place finish. But what I was disappointed in was the fact that I didn't think that I gave it my all. When I was speaking on the stage, I was telling my personal story, I was giving a personal message, but there was something missing. When I was speaking, I messed up on stage. And I'm not even embarrassed about messing up on stage. That's common. What I was frustrated about was that I knew the judges were going to mark me down. And my mind all of a sudden went to the judging of the contest and how I was going to be marked down negatively instead of concentrating on what really mattered, the message and my story. Because of that, there was one story that I absolutely loved, one story that I thought was the strongest story in my arsenal. And I couldn't tell that story with the same passion that I had before. I felt that I didn't give my story the justice that it deserved. And that ate me up for 3 years. I knew that if I got back on that stage, I knew that I would have to concentrate on giving the message and focusing on what was more important, sharing that message to the audience. I decided from that point on, I was going to focus on speech execution, executing my speech the way that I knew that it was supposed to be done. 2017, that's exactly what I did. I got back to the semifinals, but I didn't get out of the semifinals. However, I left that stage much more content than I did in 2016 because I did the best that I could for that speech at that time. When you are speaking, if you decide to go to a speech contest, or even if you're just presenting your speech in your Toastmaster clubs, your goal should be to do the best for that speech at that time. Leave the stage knowing that there was nothing more that you could have done for that speech at that time. If you can do that, you can leave the stage content that you did your absolute best. However, that still meant that I did not make it to the World Championship of Public Speaking, and I didn't win the World Championship. I decided to try again in 2018. In 2018, this was what I call a story of two trophies. In 2018, again, I competed. I made it to my district, but I ended up with this trophy, the second place trophy for my district. When I won that trophy, I was disappointed. I thought I did everything right. I had my style now. I was focusing on speech execution, but now I was speaking. I still felt I was improving, but I was moving backwards. I was down on myself. I was discouraged, even borderline depression, because I thought that I'm not going to win the World Championship of Public Speaking. And now Toastmasters is going to have this video quarterfinal that's going to totally change the game in the international speech contest. I can't possibly win this. It's going to be almost impossible for me to win the World Championship now. It actually took 6 months for me to sit in my living room, look at my bookshelf, and realize that I had won another trophy. I had won this trophy on that same day. I had become the evaluation champion for my district. This was the first time that I had ever competed in another contest outside of the international speech contest. And I won it in my first year. But instead of realizing how much I had grown as an all-around speaker, I was focused on the fact that I could not win the trophy that I wanted. But when I sat and looked at that first place trophy for evaluation, I thought to myself, there are so many people who wish they could be where I am skill-wise. There are so many people who wish they could hold the trophies that I hold. And yet here I am sitting here down on myself because I didn't get a slightly bigger trophy. That was when I decided that I needed to focus on growth instead of focusing on results. When I did that, I said, I'll do this one more time. I'll compete in the international speech contest one more time, just focusing only on my growth. Every single round that I competed that year, I had a goal. The goal could have been to remember my speech. The goal could have been making sure that I had proper speech structure. The goal could have been making sure that my body matched the words that were coming out of my mouth. Every single round, I had a goal so that I could know, even if I were to lose, I knew that I was going to get better and that regardless if I won a trophy or not, I was going to have a successful speech contest season. But one thing that I didn't do, I said this year, I am not going to make it a goal to win the World Championship of Public Speaking because it is not truly a goal because I can't control the outcome. This is when I really started to realize how lucky you have to be to win the World Championship. There are judges who decide if you are the champion or not. You cannot control what the judges are thinking. You cannot control the skill level of your opponents. Therefore, it's not something that is truly a goal. It is a dream. It is a worthy dream, and it's a dream that you can aspire to, but it is not truly a goal. But what you can control, what you can make a goal is your own personal growth. But it just so happened that the year where I decided I wasn't going to be the world champion of public speaking, the year I decided not to make that my goal, I won the world championship of public speaking. On that day, I was focused on something in particular. I made a promise to myself that if I ever got back to the 2006 to the world stage, I would focus on what truly mattered, giving my message to the audience. Even though I stumbled in one part of my speech, I showed the growth from before, and I decided to just keep pressing on, ignoring the mistakes, ignoring what the judges may or may not think, and decided to just focus on the message to my audience. And that is my story of how I became the world champion of public speaking. But out of all of this, We have to go back to what I was before, the shy introvert that had become the world champion of public speaking. I'm hoping that you can realize now that it wasn't just an overnight process. It's something that you shouldn't be fanatical about, because it's not some miraculous transformation. It's not some formula that I can give you to become the next world champion of public speaking. It's hard work. It's dedication. It's realizing that you can learn a bit more. It's realizing that you can ask for help. It's realizing that there is more to giving a speech than just reciting words to people. It all comes down, again, to that one mantra. Keep speaking, keep improving, and keep moving forward. And I hope for you, fellow Toastmasters, that you keep moving forward. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your personal journey, the trials and the tribulations that you've accomplished. So we're going to open up for questions. If anyone has any questions for Aaron, we have a few minutes that he can answer your questions. One of the questions that I hear often, Aaron, is how do you keep your speech fresh when you are competing? Because many times you're repeating the same speech over and over again. How do you keep it fresh?
For me, one of the ways that I keep my speech fresh, I will do something that I call practicing for authenticity. Basically, what I mean by that, I will decide to give my speech, but make sure that it's done in a way that if I told it at the dinner table, it would just be a story that I would tell at the dinner table with my family, that everybody would enjoy, that people would want to hear time and time again. It's more natural for us to hear a story in that environment, because that's usually how we hear stories. We gather around the dinner table, we hear those stories from our family. When it's that natural, that's when it becomes a little bit easier to tell. It doesn't become robotic. So I will try to practice for being natural. Other ways that you can be more natural when you're telling your stories is to make sure that you're using words that you normally use. I'm not going to use a 5-syllable word in mostly any of my speeches, because that's not usually how I speak. I don't speak with those big words. I usually speak with basic words. I also don't use any unnatural body movements. I try to keep it as personal. I try to keep it as authentic as possible. And that's the way that I keep it fresh and keep it authentic to myself.
Thank you. Cheryl, I think you had a question. Please unmute yourself.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for being with us here today. I loved your story, and I really related and felt your pain when you talked about the speech where something went wrong in your inner critic, and it tied you up. So can you share some techniques that you've used since then, or maybe that you've learned for quieting that noise that goes on while we're in those situations?
I honestly think that your inner critic can be used as an advantage. Now, the key is making sure that you're not a person who's just constantly down on yourself, that every time you give a speech, like, oh, that wasn't good enough. Oh, that was crap. Don't beat yourself up. That's just personal abuse of yourself. You need to concentrate instead on what you did well and what you can improve upon. And even if you're being your own devil's advocate, you need to say, okay, this is what I think is a limitation in my speech. I don't think this makes sense. This is something that bothers me. One thing that I use is what I call a bothers me list. Now, I will write out my speech. I will practice my speech a couple times, and then I'll start writing down things that bother me about the speech. Depending on how much it bothers me, I may make immediate changes there to get rid of whatever bothers me. But usually alone, this list means nothing, or everything written down on this list means nothing. However, if I give this speech to an audience and somebody comes to me and says, Aaron, I didn't think that the story connected because there was a missing action from one of the characters, or the character acted out of character. Now, if any of that feedback is on my bothers me list, that is my immediate red flag to change that aspect of the speech and make it better. However, if nobody gives me that feedback, maybe my inner critic is just a little bit too strong and nobody really cares about that point. So you can utilize the bothers me list to write down what bothers you, to put it on a piece of paper, and then test out your speech to see if other people feel the same way.
Thanks. Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Is there anything that you do in the moment when that chatter threatens to overwhelm you or undermine your delivery of a speech?
Honestly, by the time I'm going to give the speech, I know that I have practiced enough to give the speech the way that I want to give it. I have a whole process that I have a whole hour that I could talk about my process alone. But just to give you a quick idea of what I do, I will record myself, both audio and video. I will record myself and then I will listen and watch those speeches over and over again. And it's usually, by the time I'm done my process, it's the best audio version and it's the best video version. Usually I'm listening to my audio over and over and over again. So I have it down pat. I know that this speech is the speech that I'm going with. I don't have any changes that I'm going to make. I usually stop my editing process at least 2 days before the contest or before I give a presentation. During the 2019 World Championship, I stopped editing 2 weeks before the convention even started. So I knew that the speech was ready. So I didn't have that inner chatter anymore because I had done my process. I had gone through all of the practicing. I knew that I was ready.
Thanks.
Anyone else have a question? Aaron, I don't know if you've been able to read the chat, but I know several people have said your story resonates with their own personal struggles. So they appreciate you being here today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Any advice for the Zoom world? Because, you know, obviously you got to be on a stage. It's so much different presenting a speech than in the Zoom world. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience or your advice for people that now are doing it virtually?
Absolutely. One thing that is promised in life is change, or one of the things that are promised in life is change. You will always encounter it, and whenever you encounter it, you're going to think that it's the worst thing in the world. I remember when the contest organizers decided that they were going to include the video quarterfinal. So that was a bit more virtual because you were going to be judged by an audience that wasn't sitting right in front of you. It meant that you had to do things differently. However, the fundamentals did not change. I still needed to give proper eye contact. I still needed to have proper speech structure. I still needed to make sure that I engage with all of the audience. The only difference was that in addition to the audience that was physically in front of me, I had to treat the camera as if it was a member of the audience. So that meant that I had to look directly in that camera lens as if it were the eyes of a person sitting in the audience that day. Now, fast forward to now, we're in 2020 and we're speaking virtually almost all the time. However, the fundamentals still do not change. You still need to have proper speech structure. You still need to have vocal variety. You still need to have voice projection, but you also need to think about the medium that you're using. Projection's probably not as bad of, or is not going to be as much of a struggle anymore because you can have a microphone right in front of you. So you don't have to worry about yelling too loud or being too soft. You can just adjust your microphone. Again, we talk about eye contact. Eye contact changes. So instead of looking directly at everyone, you're going to be looking at the camera lens, which is something that I was able to adjust to because I had already known how to do that when I was speaking to the camera during the video quarterfinals. So you have to think about the fundamentals that do not change. Then you have to adjust to the medium. You don't have to change as much as you think, because usually the fundamentals will not change.
Great information. Thank you so much. I think everyone's thanking you in the chat. We really appreciate it. One last chance for a question. Anyone? Take yourself off mute. You can ask a quick question.
Speak now or forever hold your peace until you have the next champion.
Hi, I have a question. This is Cheryl Holyfield. Hi.
Yes.
Hi, quick question. Whenever I speak, I always feel like I get really nervous because once I start having eye contact or making eye contact with people in the audience, and when you start zooming in on people's faces and you kind of get a feel for like if they're really engaged with you or if they're not engaged with you, that always tends to kind of intensify the nerves for me. So I know oftentimes people always say that when you look at the audience, you should maybe think of something funny to take your mind off of really focusing on them. Or they may say like, envision people in underwear and things like that. So I'm just curious, like, do you do any of that when it comes to making eye contact with the audience? Like, do you see people when you talk? Do you kind of zone them out? Like, what happens for you when you're speaking?
Well, I will say that for me, I don't necessarily focus on the specific people anymore. So I will tend to look at them, but not truly look at them, if that makes sense. So that comes with experience. And it's something I've been speaking now in Toastmasters for 11 years. And I had prior experience before that, as I shared before. But one thing that I have learned is that when you are looking at the audience, you tend to concentrate on certain facial expressions that will be negative in your mind, or body language that will be negative in your mind. So we always concentrate on the person with the stoic face when we're telling a joke. They may smile, but they won't laugh like the others, and that just bugs us. Forget the fact that 98% of the other audience members laughed at your joke. You were just concentrated on that one person, or the one person that has their arms crossed. Forget about that it's cold in the room. You're just concentrated on the fact that they're just sitting there with their arms crossed. So that means that they don't accept your speech. A lot of times we get into our own head. Instead, what we need to focus on is the message. We need to focus on the story. Now, one thing that you can do, what a lot of people do before the presentation, they will engage with the members of their audience. This way they get a little bit more rapport with people. They can feel more confident speaking to them because now they're not speaking in front of strangers. Something else that you can do, you can concentrate or always come back to the smiling faces in the room. So if you are speaking and you see somebody is smiling, like I see Roxanne is smiling with my peripheral vision. If we were in a physical setting, I would find a way to glance back at Roxanne because I know that she's smiling, and that gives me a little bit more encouragement. Or if there are other people spread out through the room who are smiling, you can glance back at them. You don't want to concentrate on specific people, especially when those specific people don't have the body language or the facial expressions that will give you confidence. But instead of focusing on the specific people, focus first on your message. And then, as I said before, engage with the audience beforehand and find the smiling faces in the room to give you a little bit more confidence when you speak to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
and
much,
congratulations
Erin.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for all the valuable information that you shared today. We sincerely appreciate you spending your morning with District 44. I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you to everyone that joined us today. We did record this, and I will share it with the rest of the district because I believe they would find it very useful as well. Good luck in your continuous journey. I know you have a lot of exciting things planned, I'm sure, for your professional life and your future. So we wish you much luck. And again, thank you so much for spending your day with us.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Enjoy your Saturday, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Roxanne. Thank you for this great webinar. What a fun morning.
Yes, definitely. I enjoyed it as well.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
all for
Have a good
being
day.
here.
A lot of takeaways for sure.
Yes.
Hi, Jerry. I just wanted to say hi to Jerry.